My special guest tonight is someone I consider to be one of the best screen actors in the business, Mr. Rod Steiger, and I shall be talking to him later in the program. But first of all, I'm going to explore the world of comedy through the eyes of two people who come from very different generations, but who are united in their devotion to and talent for the music halls. One is a veteran, the surviving half of one of Britain's most famous comedy duos, Flanagan and Allen, and he's Chesney Allen. The other, and my first guest, is by comparison to Mr. Allen little more than a whippersnapper, and yet despite his tender years, and I am speaking comparatively, is acknowledged as one of the experts on that era in British comedy when the halls were packed and the likes of Max Miller, Jimmy James, the Crazy Gang, and others took unerring aim at the nation's funny bone. But he's not just an historian of the theatre, he's also the custodian of a tradition, for he himself is a gifted comedian and an actor currently displaying his talents as Fagin in a revival of Oliver. Ladies and gentlemen, Roy Hudd.
He was panic-stricken when he saw my name on the sheet, you know. He thought it was going to be that geezer with the emu, didn't you?
I'll tell you why I didn't be able to be this polite in my introduction. Tell a little bit, first of all, about Fagin. Did you need a nose job for it, or what?
Well, it was a funny thing, actually, because, I don't really need a nose job. Look at that, do I? Not really. But my missus said, that's a great part for you. You don't need a nose job. But actually, I thought I'd better try and do a bit, you see. And, seeing Alec Guinness in the film, right. Fantastic. That was the greatest actor in the world, that was, wasn't it? So I thought, well, I'll have a go, you see. So we got to the dress rehearsal of it. And you make these false noses and stuff with mortician's wax, you know. So I got this great big mortician, and 20 minutes I spent making this fabulous hooter like this, you see. This was a dress rehearsal, thank God there was nobody in, So my first entrance, I come out of this fireplace, you see, and Oliver bows to me, and he says, sir, so all the music, fantastic and everything. I come out with this great big nose on, he bows to me, and he said, sir, and as he bowed to me, he hit me on the nose, and walked away with my nose on his forehead. I thought, that's the end of the makeup job, so I don't do much.
You enjoy doing it, though? You enjoy playing Fagin?
I can't, honestly, I think it's always been an ambition of mine to play in a musical. I mean, this part must be the greatest part in any musical.
It's a very good part.
Oh, yeah. I've been doing it a year now, and honestly, I look forward to going into work every night. Let's do it. He's such an interesting character. You find new things about him, and you find new gags and all.
That's one of the things about it. It's a very good actor's part, even though it's in a musical, and very few of those around.
That's right, and it's interesting for me, because, like sort of working stand-up comedy and all that, you get used to ad-libbing. Well, it's interesting for playing Fagin, because I can still ad-lib, but I have to ad-lib in the character of Fagin.
Yeah.
That's great.
Now, let's talk about this affinity that you have with old-time music hall. I happen to know, of course, Max Miller is your great favourite. In fact, didn't you name your son Max?
That's right, yeah, and it was a girl. It was ridiculous. But Max, anyone who saw him, of course, knows, but the whole thing was that the man used to walk on, and he looked sort of outrageous, had terrific costume on and all that sort of thing. Always had a very bright +4s, wild sort of costume. But it's difficult to explain. I'll do a little bit of it.
Yeah, please. The floor's yours.
Yeah, well, anyone who knows, so Mary from the Dairy, and he used to come on, and he was straight into the attack, which was the great thing of the old comics. Now, here's a funny thing. Now, here is a funny thing. I went home last night. Now, there is a funny thing. I went through the kitchen, into the bedroom. There's the wife crying her eyes out. I said, now, what's the matter with you? She said, it's all right for you, Miller, out half the night. Well, you've been out, I've had a burglar in here. I said, did he get anything? She said, no, half, I thought it was you. She's a huge woman, my wife, 20 stone she weighs, 20 stone, what I go through. Listen, I can't... And you know I cannot trust her as far as I can throw her, do you know that, lady? I come home one night, I said, well, listen, I've just found out our milkman has made love to every woman in this street except one. She said, I'll bet it's that stuck-up cow at number 12. He did one night. We were at Finsbury Park Airport, it made me laugh, and he said, I come home one night. It was very daring for Max, because he wasn't very daring, you see. He said, I come home one night, she's in bed with 3 fellas. I said, hello. She said, what's the matter? Aren't you talking to me then?
What sort of a man was he offstage, Roy? I mean, was he generous to a young comedian like yourself?
Well, I'll tell you what, we were doing our double act there, and he used to stand in the wings and watch us. We were like first on, you see, after the girls. And one night I come off and he said, I enjoyed the act very much, boys, very good. He said, I like that Shakespeare bit you do at the end. It actually was like, it was a take-off of Noel Cowell we were doing, but he said, the Shakespeare bit's great. So he said, I'll tell you what, boys, he said, come up with me and I'll get you a drink. Now, this was, fantastic thing to happen, because he'd never been guilty of ever buying anybody a drink, so the legend said,
Regs were very mean.
That's right, you see, so he says, I said, oh, blimey, this is it. And I said to Eddie, my partner, I said, we've cracked it now. I said, this is it. I said, we want to tell our grandchildren this, but Max Miller got us a drink. So he says, right, he said, come up the bar, boys. The show was still going on, you see. So we go up to the Circle Bar, sit in the Circle Bar. We've been there about 5 minutes, and he's talking all about this and that, you see. So I said to Eddie, well, this is it, he's conned us into it. I said, we were 15 quid joint, he must have been getting a few bob, So I said, oh, well, I said, what will you have, Mr. Miller? He said, now, please, he said, I've asked you up for a drink, haven't I? And he started talking again. He said, oh, what's this about, So another 20 minutes goes by, nothing, no sign of the hand in the pocket, So Eddie says, what would you like, monsieur? He said, sit down, please, boys. He said, I've asked you up for a drink, haven't I? All right, nothing happened, just then the interval came up, you see. The bar doors opened, and all the punters come in from seeing the first half, you see, and he's sitting there right in the middle of the bar, old Max. And one of them said, there he is, old Max, what will you have, Max? He said, I'll have a gin and tonic. What will you have, Roy? What will you have? He got us a drink in the end.
Because your love of that period of music hall, in fact, goes beyond that, doesn't it? Earlier than that, because another person that you impersonated is Dan Leno. Yeah. There's no way that you were old enough to have seen Dan Leno.
No, that's right. A lot of people still write to me and say, I'm glad you saw Dan Leno. It was wonderful, wasn't it? He died in 1904, you know what I mean?
How did you come to have this sort of attachment to Leno?
Well, it's a weird story, this, actually. And how it came about was two pals of mine, actors, you see, and they rang us up. I was living in Balham, and they rang me up one Sunday morning and said, you must come round and look at this flat we bought, you see. So I want to go and look at the flat for you, very exciting, So they said, hey, you must come round and see it, because it's interesting, this place, you see. So I get in the car with my missus, and I must sort of preface that by saying, ever since I can remember, I'd had a recurring dream. And this dream was a weird one. I just used to arrive at a house, go into this house, and I used to sort of walk around all the rooms and everything. I used to go down in the garden sometimes. And I always remember the garden in this dream, because it had, fairy lights all around the garden. And the dream always used to finish with me going downstairs into a basement, surrounded by about 15, 16 images of myself. I could always remember there was nothing frightening or weird about it or anything. And that's all. I just used to keep dreaming this. So we get in the car, go around to see these geezers' flat, you see. So we get out the car, and I said to him, wait a minute. I said, I know the house. She said, well, there's no number. I said, I know this house, I tell you. And it was the house that I dreamt about, you see. So I got there, I'm shaking like a leaf now, you see. So I knock on the door, and they come in, and I said, just a minute. I said, before you show us around the house, I'll tell you exactly what that room's like in there. And I described the room, it was. The other room, exactly the same. All the way through this house, and I said, now, you can get down in the garden here. And they said, yeah. So you go through that room, there's steps down. And I said, all fairy lights. And I go, that didn't mean anything to them, of course. And I said, and I explained about the dream, and I said, I always used to go downstairs, and they said, well, you can't now because it's a coal hole, and it's all boarded up. And it was only after I'd told them all this, they said, well, actually, Dan Leno lived in this house. And I dreamt this house. And it sort of follows, if you think about the 16 images, because he was a dancer, Leno, and he possibly rehearsed in that basement, and dancers rehearse with mirrors. And that's all there is to the story, really, except that I never ever dreamt the dream again. Amazing. Yeah, it's the weirdest thing. And I'm not the least bit, no, I'm not weirdy or anything. Honestly. You just broke my leg. You've never had another psychic experience? No, not at all, no. Were you interested in Leno before that point? Well, I'd sort of been interested vaguely, only because of, talking to the old performers and that. And they'd always mentioned Leno as being like sort of the great comic. And, of course, after that experience, I began to try and find little bits of his material and songs and stuff like that. And I got very interested in it because it's the weirdest stuff. And we think now we're terribly sophisticated in comedy. But Leno stuff was so way out and strange. Well, in what way? Could you compare him to any modern? Well, of the sort of stuff that, you can't imagine how he performed it, really. But the actual stuff, when you see it written down, is a bit like sort of Spike Milligan. A little bit of James Thurber, Stephen Leacock. And I mean, I can't imagine when I read this stuff how audiences sort of screamed at that. It must have just been the persona of the man. It's like looking at a script of Frankie Howard's. How do you work that out? And people all laugh, you know. Yes. Now, ladies and gentlemen who are, thank you very much, what, yes. I mean, how do you feel? It's not funny, is it? Well, they're laughing, they're raving mad.
It's true, it must be in the delivery. It's that's astonishing that you sort of compare him to those sort of very literary figures in a sense, because one imagines the audience he's playing to was at best semi-literate in those days.
They were, weren't they? Yeah. Leery old musical audiences.
That's right.
And, I mean, I got very interested. I read a book, you know, which was purported to be an autobiography of Dan Leno, which I found out afterwards it wasn't. It was written by a ghostwriter.
Really?
And when this guy wrote to me, I did this as a program on television, this thing, Dan Leno, his book, an autobiography thing. And this guy wrote to me, and he said, it's most interesting, don't think I'm after money or anything. He said, because I'm too old to want money now, he said, but I actually wrote this book. And I mean, this Leno died in 1904. And I met this guy, and he was 99 when I met him. Tom Elder, his name was. And he just retired. He ran an advertising agency in the Strand. He retired at 99. He said, I can't be doing a white journey up and down here. But he wrote this Dan Leno's book. And I asked him about it, and he said, well, a lot of it was Leno's own patter. He'd never met him, but he was a great fan of his. And a lot of the other stuff he'd written himself, but in the Leno idiom. Some marvellous lines in it. Like he tries to write a novel. Leno says, I'm going to write a novel, he said, and it starts off, it says, the moon was strolling through the streets of heaven with its hands in its pockets, whistling the British Grenadiers. Now, anyone could say the moon is shining. That's nothing fresh in stories about that. And it goes on the story, and it says, in the topmost tower of Broccoli Towers, he said, the stately home of the Earl de Cabbageley and his son Angus Spinacher, he said, a stern converse was taking place. The Earl exploded with a voice thick with emotion and bulging at both ends. He said, what was I saying? And he let out a dismal groan. This was no ordinary moan. It was a dark yellow moan with black stripes. Wonderful stuff. Yeah, it's weird, man. You know, lovely stuff. Can I just finish that little bit, actually, Mark? Because the end of the story is great, and he says, go, he says to his son, he says, go from my house, he said, never walk through the portals of this stately home again unless it is in your coffin, he said. He said, unless you give up this scheming, devious woman who loves you only for your fair young moustache. He said, but father, said Lord Angus, voice thick with emotion, I love Evangelina Stubbs. Father, what will you have? The old man, the expression disappeared from his face, buried in thought. He dug it up again and said in a steady voice, my boy, I'll have a whiskey and soda. That's wonderful.
That's beach humor, isn't it?
It is. It's really very off-put, you know. Yeah. It's lovely lines like he finds a piece, shipwrecked on a desert island, and he finds a bit of cake. On the desert island for no reason at all. There were no currants in the cake. Said, but the holes were there where they had been. And said, I rejoice to find these signs of civilization.
Do you ever miss the period that you had that you talked about earlier in touring around the country and tagging on to the greats like Miller and...
Yeah, I do. I miss the touring like mad, you know, because we've been in the West End with Oliver now for like 6 months. And that's a long time in one place. And, I mean, it is, as I say, it's one of those shows you love to come into work every night. But it gets like an office job, you know, train backwards and forwards. Whereas touring's fabulous because you meet different audiences, different people, and the company get together much more. And you've got a very close relationship. Yeah. And, I mean, unfortunately, the only thing with touring now is there's no digs, you see.
Oh, the digs.
And the digs are great.
I collect landladies.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah, I do indeed.
Well, I mean, this didn't happen to me, but I'll tell you a very good landlady story. Arthur Askey, this was, and Arthur told me this story, and he was in digs with Tommy Hanley, you see. And they get there on the Monday night, and they come back from the theatre, you see, and Tommy says, oh, dear, son, I'm dying for a wee. He said, they're having their supper, you see. So he said, where's the lab, you see? So Arthur said, well, he said, it's attached to the living room where all the family are, see, and they're having their supper in there. It's not an outdoor one, you know, it's like, you know, when they used to build them on the sides, like. And Tommy Hanley said, oh, blimey, so I don't want to go through there eating, he said. Anyway, they sit there for about a quarter of an hour, and poor old Tom's going mad, you know, he must go to the lab, you see. So he says, He says, no, but Arthur, I'll have to go, you see. So he goes through and surreptitiously as you can with about 8 people eating a meal, you know. He walks past and he said, oh, good evening, Mr. Hanley. And he said, good evening, and all that. And he goes into the lab, you see, and they're sitting outside the door. So poor old Thompson goes in there and does what as quietly as he possibly can, you know what I mean? He says, then comes the time. He said he tries to flush the toilet, you see, and he pulls the chain, nothing happens. So nothing happens. And you know what it's like when you get, you know, people there. And he said he tried every combination in the book, you know, 2 shorts and a long holding it down, you know, letting it go. Nothing happened, he said. And he's sitting there and he's going red and he said, it's so embarrassing, they're out there, you can hear knives and forks going outside. So eventually there's a bang on the door of the lab, you see. He said, yes. And the voice said, Mr. Handley, you have to surprise it.
You, of course, you collect funny men, don't you? I mean, you adore funny men.
You met my son, yeah.
Like I do. I love people who make me laugh. Who was the funniest man off stage that you ever met? Because not lots of comedians are funny off, are they?
No, I think really the funniest man off stage I ever met was Eddie Gray. You know, Monster Eddie Gray, the Crazy Gang. He was very funny. Get up to all sorts of scabs. I did a show with him at one time in Coventry, you know. I mean, the capers he used to get up to were very terrific. I thought Jimmy Wheeler was a very funny man off stage, Jim was, you know. And he always used to get into trouble, you know, and everyone sort of thought about Jim. He was a terrific boozer, you see. I mean, he used to get a bit tight, Jim, but he wasn't a terrific boozer. He was one of those guys, you know, he has about 2 pints and he's away, you know. Just couldn't take his booze. So his son, I think it was his son, lived in France, in Paris, or his daughter or somebody. And him and his missus, Jim and his missus, are going over to spend a week's holiday with him, you see, in France. So at the last minute, he gets the Saturday night date, like Battersea Town Hall or something like that, and his missus said, right, she said, I'm going, she said, but you be there. She said, I don't want any of your capers. She said, not coming over. She said, I'm going on. He said, you'll be all right, don't worry. She said, I'll be there at the airport waiting for you. So he said, righto. So he goes and does the show, and he's good as gold. Doesn't have a drink, anything like that, you know. Gets to the airport, marvellous, no drink. Gets to the airport, delay in the flight, isn't there? 3-hour delay in the flight. Well, that's fatal, isn't it? Mr. Wheeler, you know, do come in the celebrities' lounge and all that stuff, so he's at it, isn't he, Jim, you know? Gone. And he's doing his act, and they're all loving him and all that, you know. No passport, don't look at his passport, they all know who he is. Oh, you know, there we go. So he says, right. So they put him on the plane, you know, and he falls straight asleep, Jim, on the plane, you know. He doesn't know how long he's been asleep, and he wakes up, and the hostess comes along, and he says, here. He said, what time do we get to Paris? And she said, Paris, the first stop's Karachi. Jim Fitchie gets to Paris and got there, and he said, it was me, I went to Karachi. She said, you're a bloody liar, you were out there getting all that. She said, well, Jim, we're good.
Right, well, I've got to introduce now somebody, in fact, who belongs to this era that, in fact, we've been talking about, Chesney Allen. Oh. Somebody who I know you're very fond of, and again have a great affinity.
Well, old Ches was one of my first bosses.
Yeah.
And one of my first panto days. Yeah. The Opera House, Belfast. That went like a bomb.
For the moment, Roy Hudd, thank you very much indeed. In any self-respecting history of the music hall, Flanagan and Allen will rate along with the great double acts of all time. Bud Flanagan died some time ago, but is survived by his partner Chesney Allen, who was the ripe old age of 84. For those of you who remember them well, those of you who never saw them perform, here's a sample of their stuff.
You know what kind you are? No. Now, whatever you do, be careful of the cold. I'm all right. I've got my thick underwear on. I'm all right. The cold, the hole. Oh, pardon me, sir. Now, you'll be running in a very small field. Well, I can open the gate and get out. That's nothing. Now, what few runners? Yes, sir. Now, you're in the 2:30 race. What time? 2:30. Yes, sir. And you'll start about 10 to 1. How far is this? Oh, just no distance at all. Well, they start at 10 to 1. I can go home for my dinner, can't I? How about the other horses? Oh, they start about 5 to 4. What, the same day? Same day, same race. And I start at 10 to 1? Yes. Watch me about 2:45. I'll show you something. Whatever you do, watch his withers. Beg your pardon, sir? Watch his withers. Well, all right, there's nobody with us. Well, not his withers at the back. His withers in front.
Ladies and gentlemen, Chesney Allen.
bit tasty, isn't he, mate?
Yeah.
84, blimey, I wish I looked like that when I was 44.
How are you, anyway?
I'm all right, Michael, thank you.
Good.
Yeah?
I mentioned there, actually, just before you came on, Ches, that in fact you helped promote Roy, didn't you, very early in his career?
Well, I hope I did. I went to see Roy at a very small concert party at Babbacombe. And he was doing remarkably well, and I was looking for somebody for a pantomime. And so I went to see him, and the outcome was I immediately booked him to play Buttons in Cinderella at the Opera House, Belfast.
Yeah.
And a terrific success he was.
Yeah.
And so I think I helped him on his way.
Yeah. Well, listening to him there, of course, that must have struck several chords in your memory, the names he was coming out with, all people that you worked with. You didn't, in fact, though, come, did you, Ches, from a showbiz background? As such?
No. No one in my family. My father was a builder. I was the only one. And I was intended to go to a lawyer, to be a lawyer. So my father sent me, he paid a small fee and got me into a lawyer's office in Fleet Street. But I really was stage-struck. Because I used to sing songs when I was very young, go around to working men's clubs and sing 2 songs, like Yiddle on Your Fiddle, Play Some Ragtime, Sam Stern's famous number, or Save a Little One for Me, Billy Williams, The Man in the Velvet Suit. And I got 7 and 6 for that. But my father found out.
That's more than he paid me in Belfast, wasn't it?
Not quite. However, father found out and he cuffed me and pushed me all the way home. However, I went to the lawyer's office, but the senior clerk, a very important person, he said, I don't think you like this, do you? I said, no, I don't. Sticking stamps on and doing a copying machine. So he said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to go on stage. So it's right. So we bought the theatre papers, the Era, the Encore, Performer, Stage, and he wrote out. And I got a job in a repertory company. It was at West Hartlepool. It was the Lodge Percy Stock Company. And the job was small parts and assistant acting manager. Well, I thought, this is wonderful. Now, the thing is, it was 6 plays a week, you know.
6 a week?
6 plays a week, yes. Under Two Flags, Plot and Passion, Frou-Frou, Jane, Confusion, Camille, The Woman He Wanted, and it went on. There were so many of them. However, I had to go home and tell Mother. She cried. Father gave me £2 and said, don't come back. Anyway, I went to West Hartlepool. I think I was 16. And I studied and got in some very nice digs. The woman helped me with my lines. She said I was too young to be away from Mother.
Can you remember any of the lines that you...
Oh, yes, I can remember some. I can remember one drama we played. Where there was an extraordinary ending. It was The Girl Who Wrecked His Life. And in this I was playing the heavy part. Now the heavy part is the villain, as you know. And the lines were, I was in love with the hero's wife, my friend. And so I had to try and get his wife away. I was very much in love with her. And I had some lines, something like this. When she was out of the room, her baby was on a cot, and she was so much in love with her husband and her baby, she didn't want to leave. And so I had to sort of do an aside and a soliloquy, and I said, how I love this woman, how I hate the man who stole her from me. There is no sacrifice I would not make to call her mine. What did she say? If her child died, her love for her husband would die? Why shouldn't I do it? I go to a table, pick up some medicine. The cot is there. I smell it. Laudanum. Why not? She said if her child died, her love for her husband would die. Baby cries. The baby, by the way, was a chambermaid. Facing this way up. They never saw her. The baby... She doubled, you see. She was a baby cried, and I went to the baby and I said, darling, don't cry. Your mummy will be here soon. Yes, why not? I pour the laudanum out. The baby cries again. Never mind, darling. Don't cry. Meanwhile, take this. And a voice from the back of the pit at the Empire Woolly shouted out, don't take it, love. It's bloody poison. troops.
When did you first meet Bud Flanagan?
Well, I met Bud in Flanders, actually. He'd been in burlesque in America, and of course I'd been in drama, farce, sketches, everything. So that's the first. And I never met him again.
Until sometime later, wasn't it?
Until sometime later, I eventually, in my time out there in the trenches, we went to Italy, came back for the German offensive in March 1918. Practically the entire regiment was annihilated. However, I was one of the lucky ones, one of 52. I then came home for my commission, gazetted, and the war is over. So now I start to work. I have a holiday first, and I got a wonderful job at the Criterion Theatre in London. I'd never been to the West End in my life. In a fast forward, you never know, you know. Only because a man called Wellesley became a peer, and he left the cast immediately, and they were stuck. So I went in, and I met Bud in Piccadilly.
Really?
That was our next chat.
What was it like having a relationship with another comedian like that, partner, over all those years? I mean, was there ever any row?
There was no rows whatsoever. No rows whatsoever. No, it was a wonderful partnership. It was almost, it was so close and so understandable. Bud wrote the songs, the gags. He wrote most of them. We created them in the dressing room with the assistance of our man Friday, George Stone, who's been with us for years and years. And that was it, and he left the business to me. We never had any quarrels. We might have had a quarrel one week when we both bought the stage. You know?
When you both what?
We both bought the stage, you know, the one newspaper.
Yes.
When we should only bought one.
Oh, I see.
I know, but we had no quarrels.
Yes.
He's a wonderful man.
Yes. Did he make you laugh all the time?
All the time, yes, all the time. He had gags. Oh, yes, had gags all the time. Well, the whole gang did.
Yes.
The whole crazy gang.
Well, I mean, the Crazy Gang, I mean, that was an institution, wasn't it?
Oh, yes.
It really was.
Absolutely. That was the most fantastic thing ever. 6 men could go on and carry on. No quarrels ever at any time. The Americans came over, Jack Benny, Bob Hope, George Burns, the rest of it, said, were amazed.
Yes.
They said this couldn't happen in America.
Yes.
They'd be cutting each other's throats.
Yes.
So I don't
Nobody
think it
bothered.
could happen today, actually, Charles. I don't think it could happen today because
No.
comics all want to work on their own. You know, it's the awful thing you have when you go into summer shows or anything now, you know, and you say, oh, I'd like to put a couple of sketches in, and they say, no, we don't want sketches. Look, get out there and do your spot, you know.
Yes.
And nobody ever works together anymore, and I think it's a shame because I think audiences love sketches.
Yes.
And they're great fun to work with other
Yes,
comics.
yeah.
You know.
Did you ever, in fact, work with the Crazy Gang yourself?
Well, I worked with... in one show, I worked with two of them. I worked with Eddie Gray
Yes.
and Charlie Naughton in A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. We did it at Coventry for a few years. You remember
Yes,
that?
I do. Yes.
And that was fun.
But Gray's a legendary figure, isn't he? I mean,
Oh,
all
Gray.
stories still about him.
There's so many stories. They're all so wonderful. Eddie Gray's story is so wonderful. Now, I tell you what.
Please do.
The time he took Jimmy Gold home. Now, Jimmy was the saver. He always had to save his money. But on a Saturday night, he had perhaps 1 or 2 drinks too many, and Eddie would take him home. This particular Saturday, George Black had been in and said, Naughton, go take that gag out. That's a bit blue. And Jimmy got a bit annoyed about it. So going home, Jimmy's sitting in the seat, a little bit cockeyed, and he said, I should worry about George Black. I should worry about him. They get to Brixton. He says, I've got £30,000. I should worry about George Black. And Eddie's driving on. Yes, Jimmy. Yes, Jimmy. They get to Stockbridge. George Black. It's too late. He says, I've got £20,000. I should worry. Eddie goes a bit further and turns around. And Jimmy says, what's the matter, Eddie? Where are you going? He said, I'm going back. Somewhere between Brixton and Stockport, we've lost 10,000. And I'm going to find it. And it was another great gag of his, because during the war we were doing shows, and we go to Tanmere, a fighter station, and to do a show for the boys, you see, and of course the guards on the door, never knocks, go in. Yes, who? Never knocks. Show, great. Oh, here you go, fine. Next is Bud and I, Flanagan and Allen, right you are, in you go. And next act, never knocks, Naughton go. Along came Eddie Gray. Yes? He said, I have come for the plans for the Blenheim bomber for the Führer. He said, Blimey, you must go and you must be one of the crazy guys.
It was really funny. In that show, they were always up to all sorts of capers, you know, him and Charlie, even then, you know. And I did a charity show with Charlie once, you know, funny. And we did it at the Cat's Whisker at Streatham, you know?
Yes.
For a police do it was, you know, and they said, right, come and do this thing, you see. And they said, Charlie Naughton, he used to live in Streatham, just around the corner to me. So I said, Charlie wants to do something, so I was thrilled, you see. So we do this sort of double act thing, and that's fine. It was like a cod mind reading act, and I went around the audience and got the things, you know the one.
Yes, I do,
And Charlie used to say, it was all smashing bits in it, you know, like, I have here a silver coin of the realm. It has a milled edge and is worth exactly 12 pence. What is it? And Charlie used to say, I have no idea. I'd say, would you say it was a shilling? Would I be right? Yes, it's a shilling. Correct. You know, it was that. So the finish of this all went very well. At the end of the thing, we're just going to get off. We take our bow, you see. So I said, well, say good night, Charlie. He said, no, just a minute. He said, I'd like to do a song to finish with. We hadn't rehearsed this. I thought, blimey, what's he going to do now? You know, he's got no music or anything. And I said, oh, would you, well, what music would you like? He said, I don't need any music for this. He said, all I need is the accompaniment of the drummer, he said. So I'll do it for you. Yeah. So he said, is the drummer John in this? Yes, he's there. It's nice, isn't it? Good Jewish boy playing on pigskin, that's right, isn't it? He said, all the accompaniment is, he said, I'm going to sing a song. He said, whatever I mention, he said, whatever number I mention, the drummer has to bang the drum that number of times, you see. So I thought, this would be good. I never heard it. I didn't know what he was on about, you see. So he said, once I fell in love. Thank you. I only met her twice. I kissed her 3 times. And she was sweet 16. I met her in 1927.
Finally, because I want to get I want to talk just a little bit about the music before we do the sort of finality or sport. I mean, those songs that Bud wrote and you and Bud performed, they've remained popular all the time, haven't they? It's quite astonishing. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I think it's because they did have a message in them. I think they were very tuneful.
Yes.
And he wrote Underneath the Arches in 1932 in Derby. And that's it. I think that today the songs, there's no lyrics, are there? I mean, it's I love you, I love you, I love you, or don't come back, don't come back, don't come back. It goes on forever. But in these songs, there was
they sort of message. Struck a chord, didn't they, somewhere in the British public?
It did strike.
And they're a lovely tempo, you know, Chesney, aren't they? They're a lovely...
Well, the tempo it all, you know, and they were
super rhythm and sing too, you know.
Bud and I had a wonderful time.
Are you? Well, you're now going to, in fact, you're going to reenact one, aren't you? Do a couple of songs for us. Yes. Are you still in fine voice, sir?
I wouldn't know about that. We
shall find out in a minute, shall we? Yes. Well, for the moment, Chesney Allen, thank you very much indeed for being my guest. Thank you very much. So if the two of you would try to go over there and take up your position, and I shall tell the audience, in fact, what it's all about. Here's a reminder, in fact, of the style of Flanagan and Allen, with Chesney Allen doing what he always did, and Roy Hudd taking the part of Bud Flanagan. In fact, shortly after Bud died, his wife told Roy Hudd that her husband had told her that if ever a film was made of his life, then he wanted Roy Hudd to play his part. So here we are, Roy Hudd, Chesney Allen, a couple of numbers made famous by Flanagan and Allen.
Hometown, wanna wander round your back streets, see you tumble down those shack streets. I'm going back to see those pony country cousins of mine. Hometown, where they get up in the morning and to see your only. I'm going back to see those crony country cousins of mine. There's an old schoolhouse door. We used to tumble through that fall. There's a small candy store where I could go a dozen lollipops and shout for more. Hometown, where the garden trees are shady, that's where Edie was a lady. I'm going back to see those corny country cousins of mine. Now, and now a song I can't forget, and one I hope you remember. Underneath the arches, we dream our dreams away. Underneath the arches, on cobblestones we lay. Every night you'll find me tired out and warm, happy when the daylight comes creeping, heralding the dawn, sleeping when it's raining, and sleeping when it's fine. Train traveling by above, pavement is my pillow, no matter where we stray. Underneath the arches, I dream my dreams away.
And Chesney Allen. My next guest is one of my favourite screen actors. Someone once said that movies are about remembered moments. And if that's the case, then he's given me more moments to remember than most. Moments from On the Waterfront, The Big Knife, The Harder They Fall, Al Capone, The Pawnbroker, In the Heat of the Night, No Way to Treat a Lady, Waterloo, to name just a few. He won the Oscar for Heat of the Night. He won 2 British awards, one for the same film, the other for The Pawnbroker. Ladies and gentlemen, Rod Steiger. Do you agree with that films are about moments, remembered moments?
I think most of the time, well, yes. I think, unfortunately, life is like that, too. It's the moments you remember rather than the whole. Unfortunately, maybe in life you remember the tragic moments more. But in films, I agree that there's certain moments that you remember that... Well, that's what I think is what an artist gives. If they're any good, the best thing they can give you is a warm memory. If they're really special, they give you a warm memory with something constructive attached to it. But I would agree with that, yes.
What then, could I ask you, is your favourite moment from one of the movies of yours?
Well, I try to keep kind of loose and I try to improvise, in my acting within the given framework of a thing like that. But the moments that are most memorable to an actor are things that happen that he least expected. And it only happens when you allow yourself to try to believe as much as possible that you are in the scene, you are in the fictitious circumstance the playwright has given you. And we had another moment which was rather a comic moment. I did a picture called No Way to Treat a Lady. and we were doing No Way to Treat a Lady, and it was about 6 o'clock, 10 minutes to 6, and I had this makeup on, the blonde wig, and I was playing a rather fey hairdresser, and I had two young ladies who I was acting with who knew me from, we had gone to the same school together and knew we could improvise, and so the situation was I'm supposed to put her a wig, and all of a sudden you find out that I'm going to cheat her, and she said, you're no good, you're gay, you're a homo, and I said, well, it doesn't mean you're a bad person, you know. And no, I said it takes one to know one. And they laughed at that and said, cut, we'll print it. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that
ABC
because
Radio,
that's not
Eastern
original.
Summer
I've got to
Time,
think of a line. She
9
said, what are you going to do? I said, well, tomorrow, give me a 3/4 shot. That means like from here up. And I'll go to the door. When you get to the
Bruce
door,
Webster
you yell
with the news
homo,
in
and I'll
brief.
turn around and I'll say something.
The Queensland State Council
And they
of the
said,
Labour
all right.
Party
So I
has
go out
moved a
that night
vote
and
of
I'm trying to figure
confidence
out
in the
what the hell
federal
am I going to
opposition
say.
leader, Mr.
And I don't
Hayden.
know, and I go to dinner by
The meeting of
myself.
the council
and
today
I'm with
also
this
saw
waiter.
Senator
This waiter
Keith,
and I always
Mr.
like to
Hayden's
tease each other.
nominee
He
on
was
the
a very
ALP
charming
State
gentleman. He was
Administrative
also an actor.
Committee,
He was struggling
selected
for a
in
living.
#1 position on
So
the
we used
Senate
to camp
ticket.
back and forth.
The ABC State political reporter in Brisbane says the moves are expected to stave off, for the time being, intervention by the federal executive of the party in the Queensland branch. Tropical cyclone Ina has hit the mining town of Shea Gap in Western Australia, and reports from the town say that at least 2 double-storey accommodation blocks have been demolished. The cyclone is expected to move on to the town of Marble Bar, which is on red alert.
And what happened is,
The Australian Democrats ended their first national conference in Canberra today with an announcement that the party will not be allocating first voting preferences in the coming federal election. The 2-day conference, attended by about 150 party members from around Australia, was held at the Australian National University. The United States Olympic Committee has turned down a request from President Carter to bring forward its decision on whether to boycott the Moscow Games. The committee has told the President that authority for a withdrawal from the Games could only be given by the committee's governing body when it meets in April. The Victorian Minister for Immigration and Ethnic Affairs, Mr. Wood, says Cambodgian refugee children will be arriving for adoption in only a few months. He said today the Victorian government would be carefully vetting the 400 people who have already offered to adopt Cambodgian children. Mr. Wood returned today from a mission to Southeast Asia. Israeli diplomats have arrived in Cairo to open the first Israeli embassy in an Arab state. Egyptian diplomats are due in Israel in the next few days to open their embassy in Tel Aviv. That was the news in brief. More news on Radio 1 in 1 hour.
All right. Now we fixed the hands. You know why you're here with us if you got
Hello there, and welcome back to part 3 of Science Fiction with Sunday nights, 5am in Adelaide, 3LO in Melbourne, 2BL in Sydney, and 7ZR in
Nobody knew the
Hobart.
difference, which makes me suspect playwriting sometimes. What about the characters when you come to play a character? I mean, you are an actor, you're not a film star. You are a film actor. You're an actor. That's what you are. There are many people in movies actually who can claim that. And I talked recently to Simon Guinness about the art of acting. It's fascinating to see what actors do about the part. And he was saying that he was walking. He said you're a walk right into a character. How much of your technique on observation? Well, I don't know. I look at people when something interests me in a person, when there's an oddity or a novelty or an individuality is really the word. I don't really go around studying that much, except like when I did W.C. Fields. Yes, then I read all the books until they begin to contradict each other, which they always do on the life of a famous person. All of a sudden one says he lived here, the other says he never lived there. And then I had in my room, I had set up a small projection screen, and I watched some of his old movies, because I wanted to get some of his mannerisms, and I listened to records of his later shows, because I wanted to hear his voice. In that instance, I did a lot of study. The best studying you can do as a human being and an actor is actually try to learn, which I still am, to listen and look at the people I'm talking to, whether you're an actor or not, and there's also some kind of a gift involved, perhaps, I don't know, where you absorb. Once, for instance, I did a picture called The Big Knife, where I played the head of a studio, and I couldn't understand what the man was about, and except his first speech had such hatred towards women that I couldn't believe it. But it was in between the lines, and maybe because at that time I had been reading a little bit about psychotherapy and things like that, and I said, this man is hostile towards women. It's not just like him too much. There's something making problem with this man or something, I don't know. And I couldn't figure him out, so I said, I'm going to play a game. This is a game I do with a character. I went like, let's say, Harry. And I walked through the first floor and I said, now what do I, as the character, think of everything on this floor? From men's shirts to ladies' lingerie to bicycles. Then I went up to the next floor, every floor, the food floor, and came back down. And as I was walking out with all these images were going through my mind. I got to know him a little better. And ironically, as I left the men's shop in this store was, of course, in New York, I saw a question mark, tie tack. You know, men wear tie. Right. There was a question mark, and I said, my God, that's right. This man's a question mark man. He doesn't know if he likes women or not. He doesn't know if he likes
That's the
living or
Castle
not.
Music
So
Orchestra, conducted by Eric Cook, and you've lost that love and feeling.
And also I
it's a
saw
great
hearing
Stephen
aid, and I said,
Sondheim
yes,
song,
he's such a
wonderfully
bigger
sung
than
by
life
our
figure.
own
I
Jill
have to keep
Perryman.
one foot on the ground, like
Ladies
he's got one
who
foot on the
lunch.
ground. Otherwise, the public's going to say, well, he's too big. But you give him a little defect like a hearing aid, which I use, which I didn't play up in the film that much, and he becomes human. And these are peculiar games you play to try to get into parts. I mean, all actors, I think, strive towards the same thing, to entertain, to explore life through the medium of acting, but not one of them I know does it the same way, though the principles may be the same.
What about Fields? Well, why did you particularly want to play Fields? Was he a great hero of yours?
Well, he wasn't in the beginning, but I mean, when somebody comes to you and says, this is like, I want to do Albert Einstein,
and looking grim,
series like, or
they've been
a monster like Stalin.
choosing a
Somebody comes
hat.
with a person like that, it's
Does
almost
anyone
impossible
still
to say,
wear
no, I don't
a
want to try. It's such a challenge, it's such an exciting thing that
I'll
maybe
drink
for a
to
split
that.
30 seconds, and that's about all. You may touch this man, you may become
Here's
this
to
man,
the
you may have
girls
become
who
part of
stay
the life
smart,
of this man. That
aren't
to me
they, I guess?
is living. That to me is exploring life.
Rushing
and,
to their
and bringing
classes in
entertainment along with it,
optical
because the
art,
capital crime of an
wishing
actor
it
is he
would
should
pass.
never be boring. Sorry about that. You know, but
Another long, exhausting day. Another $1,000. A matinee, a Pinter play, perhaps a piece of honor. I'll drink to that.
the excitement and also becomes an education.
And one
Can
from
you
Mother.
remember from the movie any moment?
Here's to the girls who play wife. Aren't they too
No, I
much?
don't remember too. I know.
Keeping house
Well, I
with
just
clutching
remember, like,
a
he had
copy
two voices.
of
He was
life
being
just
introduced
to
now.
keep
One
in
voice
touch.
changes, and talking to him, talking like that. It was not the voice of
The
life.
ones who
They said,
follow the
I
rules
tried to be fine.
and meet themselves at the schools. Too busy to know that they're fools. Aren't they a gem? I'll drink to them. Let's all drink to them.
The adjective in front of that. And then when he worked, of course, he did it bigger, you know. He'd slur his voice bigger and say, it's grand, marvelous, I like him. I love the way he's turned. I hope he breaks every leg of his body.
Here's to the girls who just
we had
watch.
things
Aren't
like
they
that.
the
And he would
best?
extend his voice, but his other voice was like that.
When they get
And I used to drive
depressed, it's a bottle of
wife
scotch.
crazy, because when I do a
plus
character, now I'm
little
doing his voice. When I do a character, I would walk in the I use it with an accent. I use it all day in my private life.
Another brilliant singer. Another
The guy gave me a look and said, what is it, we got another actor here showing off? But anyway, you hang in there. That's what I had to do.
Yeah. Another thing that interested me about it, lots of actors are conditioned by their shape, by their physical shape, aren't they? I mean, you're one of them, of course, aren't you, in a sense?
I've done a lot of battleships, yeah.
No, but you know what I mean?
Yes, I certainly do.
Thank you.
Right.
But, I mean, one would never think of you, for instance, as a dancer. And yet, in fact, you did.
Just a moment.
And yet, in fact, you did dance in one movie, didn't you?
I did the ballet in Oklahoma.
That's right.
And I did it because I was with this marvelous, great dedicated actress, Agnes DeMille, and Fred Zinnerman, the director who directed the picture, gave me my first movie job. And they came to me. I came in one morning, and I was feeling pretty good because I thought I was doing fairly well with the part. And they had told me that I wouldn't have to do the ballet because they were going to get a dancer. And they suddenly came in and said, we cannot get anybody who looks as heavy as you do from the rear. They were talking about my shoulders.
Let that be clear. And I said, oh, what do you mean? You're crazy. I can't. I have to. And I was doing 1, 2, 3, 4, and all these dances are going around, and I looked like a misplaced dinosaur. It was incredible. And then I had to lift Bambi Lynn. That was the end of the ballet. Judd picks her up, and he lifts her like that, and he walks like that heavily off the stage through beeswax smoke. If you ever walk through beeswax smoke, you have my sympathy, because it closes your throat and every other part of your anatomy. Anyway, what happens is I'm walking, and we had to do it 27 times, and I figured out she weighed 123 pounds. I lifted over a ton. Over a ton. And the last take, my arms were like that, but you couldn't see it in the distance. But that was a frightening experience. And I also want you to know I did my own singing in Oklahoma.
Yes, you did indeed.
I did.
So baritone voice you have, isn't it?
Well, it's a dramatic tenor. It's
I don't know why they should think you're dancing and I mean, I thought you were very good. I thought a threat to Gene Kelly.
It doesn't mean you're a bad person.
Have you ever wished, though, on this thing about the physical appearance, have you ever wished that you were sort of the tall, lean, sort of outdoor type or indoor type? Well, you know what I'm getting at? You could play the romantic roles.
Yes. No, I did. Of course I did, but the most... Yes, I mean, I'll never be able to do some... I never would have been able to do some of the, the things I've liked to done. But I find that I don't believe there's any such thing as character actor or straight actor. You play a character even if you're supposed to be the juvenile lead, because it's not the story of life. And the minute you say a word that's written by somebody else, you're playing a character. But I have been most fortunate, whatever magnificent figure I have that I carry around with me, because it has allowed me to work a lot. Because I could play my first role on Broadway. I was 24 years of age. I played a 56-year-old detective who was dying of cancer in a play by Odets called Night Music. Now, had I not been fairly large, I couldn't have made the old, I did Death of a Salesman here at BBC. I don't know, over 10 years ago. Again, if I hadn't been that kind of figure, I couldn't have played a lot of older people. Mm. And I'm happy with its benefits. It's just sometimes when you see some gorgeous creature talking to some other gorgeous creature and you're not one of the gorgeous creatures that you say something wrong, But, no, I have at times, yes, but basically I've been very lucky.
Yes, but you'd like to play the romantic roles just to see what...
Well, I would like... One of the things I wanted to play more than anything, because I think I'm passable enough, I always wanted to do a remake of Brief Encounter.
Ah, yes.
And only I wanted to do it with myself and Annie Bancroft and move it to New York, like they came from Connecticut into the city.
Right.
I always wanted to do, remember a marvelous film called Random Harvest, about the man who goes in town and loses his memory, and his wife comes and stays his secretary, and he falls in love with her again. And I always wanted to do the disfigured pilot in Enchanted Cottage. See, I could do those because you don't have to look as beautiful as Tyrone Power or somebody like that. It's a human being, and we're not that bad,
Are you a romantic man off screen, though?
I don't know. I imagine so. I don't know. I write poetry, and yes, I am. What am I quibbling? I mean, yeah, I'm a sucker for romance. I mean, nobody's a bigger weeper in the theater or in watching a play or something romantic goes on. I watched Mutiny on the Bounty last night and got all upset about the verdict.
I mean, you like women, do you?
I mean, yes, I'm teasing now.
As a group?
As a group, I'll take them. I'll take any group I can get. No. Yes, I have a whole... You see, I wrote a poem once which says, I am of you as you are of me, yet being so much of one, we are different. And yet, that difference contains a need. And that need, desired and pursued with respect, makes us both more completely ourselves. I wrote that when I was 17. That's what I believe men and women are all about. One half of each other. We do make each other more completely ourselves. The most important line in it is with respect. If there's an absence of respect between two people, regardless of their sex, there can be no such thing, in my opinion, as love. That's the end of my lecture today.
That's all very well in a less phony and frenetic society than the one that you inevitably have to work in and live in, which is the film industry, isn't it? I mean, what I'm trying to get at is that it must be very difficult to have a proper, lasting relationship with someone when you are working in an industry where I think it's
well, yes.
You know what I mean? It's very difficult because of the pressure.
It's difficult for me to talk because, unfortunately, I'm in the middle of my third divorce, which is no medal on my jacket whatsoever. And I'll take 60% of the blame, or 70, or 50, anyway. So it's hard to discuss, but there is a tendency to confuse fame with affection, success with security, and love with common over-dramatized tendencies towards feelings in general. I'm talking about myself now. I am not an expert. I'm talking about myself. I tend to need drama. I tend to over-dramatize in my private life. And God knows, overact a lot of times in my professional life. But I don't think the environment has got to do with it. I think when the curiosity of common interests conflict between two people in any environment, when conversations become shorter and silences become longer, when meals become just meals and not get-togethers, there's something dying, going and gone. And some parts of my profession can help that, yes. You can go out and you meet some very exciting people of the opposite sex playing opposite you. You can fall into a fantasy of being in love, especially if you're romantic. I'm not saying that's what happened in this case. But there are perhaps more dangers. And then I've seen people, God bless them, they can't help it. So let us say you started off from a small town and suddenly you have some kind of a talent and you suddenly come in front of the world. And all of a sudden you're meeting some of the top beauties of the world, the top minds of the world. And there is someone back home who was not up there. But that's not to say not as good as whatever you meet up there.
Sure.
But your tendency is to get embroiled. It's a new thing. It's a new excitement. There's a certain type of woman you've never met before, a certain type of man you've never met before, and you may make, there is more chance, or there's a long-winded way of saying a long chance of making a mistake that may, in the years, pay you off with the burden of loneliness.
But I've always, I mean, I've known you not well, but I've met you before, and I've interviewed you before.
Well, we can skip that part.
Well, no, but I've always seen, the conclusion I've come to about you in any case is that you are a loner, aren't you, by nature?
I have been, more or less, yes. I have been. It's not a destiny. It wasn't selected. I was alone when I was 12 years of age, and a lot of stuff I don't want to go through. The people have had much tougher time than I've ever had. But I have basically noticed that in the lives of other people, too. Yes, I guess so, because son of a gun, I'm going to be alone again.
Well, Rod Steiger, thank you for talking to me so frankly. I can assure you, sir, that they're on the plus side, to end on an upbeat, that there will be a chauffeur-driven car waiting outside the television centre for you. Rod Steiger, thank you very much. Thank you. That's it then for this week. My thanks to Chesney Allen, to Roy Hudd, and of course to Rod Steiger. We'll see you about the same time next week. Until then, from all of us here, good night.